Family is supposed to be forever, but sometimes even the strongest bonds can be tested beyond their breaking point. This is the story of how decades of love and sacrifice were overshadowed by years of neglect, and how one rainy night in October forced me to make the hardest decision of my life. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The day I turned 57 was just like any other Tuesday in Mapleton. The autumn leaves were starting to fall, painting our suburban neighborhood in shades of amber and gold. I'd taken the day off work, not because anyone had planned anything special, but because it had become my own small tradition to give myself. That gift, at least. My name is Margaret Wilson, though everyone calls me Maggie. For 32 years, I'd worked as a nurse at Mapleton General, spending most of those decades in the pediatric ward. There's something about helping children heal that kept me going through the hardest times in my life. My divorce 15. Years ago, my sister's battle with cancer, and more recently, the growing distance between me and my only son, Derek. The morning of my birthday, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood come to life. Mrs. Gonzalez from across the street waved as she collected her newspaper. The Miller kids raced to catch the school bus at the corner. Normal, everyday moments that somehow felt more poignant when you're spending your birthday alone. I checked my phone. No messages. Not that I was surprised. Derek hadn't remembered my birthday for 3 years straight now. The first year, I made excuses for him. He was busy establishing his career at that fancy marketing firm in Chicago. The second year stung more, but I still defended him when my friend Cheryl suggested he was taking me for granted. This third year, I'd stopped expecting anything. My ex-husband Richard had sent his customary birthday email, punctual as always, if emotionally distant. My coworkers had a small cake waiting when I stopped by the hospital yesterday to pick up my schedule for next week. My sister Beth had called from Arizona the night before, promising a gift was in the mail. I wasn't completely forgotten, just by the one person who used to make me hand-drawn cards with "World's Best Mom" written in wobbly crayon letters. The house felt too quiet. It was the same split level I'd lived in for 26 years, where Derek had grown up. After Richard moved out, I'd considered downsizing, but I couldn't bear to part with the home where so many memories lived in every corner. Derek's height, marks on the kitchen door frame, the small dent in the living room wall from when he practiced baseball indoors despite my warnings, the treehouse in the backyard that Richard built when Derek was 7, now weathered but still standing. I finished my coffee and decided to treat myself to breakfast at Maggie's Diner downtown. No relation to me, though Derek used to think the place was named after me when he was little. The owner, Jim, always gave me extra bacon on my birthday. At least some traditions were held. As I drove into town, my phone rang through the car speakers. My heart leapt, but it was just Beth calling. "Again, happy birthday, sis." Her voice filled the car. "Did my card arrive?" "Not yet," I said, "but the mail hasn't come today. How's Phoenix?" "Hot as ever. Listen, I was thinking, why don't you fly out here for Thanksgiving this year? Mark and the kids would love to see you, and you shouldn't be alone for the holidays." I sighed. "I don't know, Beth. I've always had Thanksgiving dinner at my place. What if Derek decides to come home this year?" Beth was quiet for a moment. "Has he called today?" "He's probably busy," I said automatically. "He'll call later." "Maggie," Beth's voice softened. "You've been saying that for 3 years. When did you last speak to him?" I turned into the diner parking lot, feeling a familiar heaviness in my chest. "He texted on Easter. Said he couldn't make it because of a work emergency." "And Christmas before that?" "He stayed in Chicago. Said the flights were too expensive." I didn't mention how I'd offered to pay for his ticket, or how he'd left me on red. "You deserve better," Beth said firmly. "I know he's your son and you love him, but—" "I should go," I interrupted. "Jim's waving at me through the window. I'll think about Thanksgiving, okay?" Inside the diner, the familiar smell of coffee and maple syrup was comforting. Jim greeted me with a bear hug and led me to my booth, the one by the window with a view of Mapleton's small town square. "The usual birthday special, Mags?" he asked, already pouring coffee into my mug. "You know it," I smiled. Jim and I had dated briefly after my divorce, but we'd settled into a comfortable friendship instead. Sometimes I wondered if I should have given that relationship more of a chance, but timing never seemed right. As I waited for my food, I scrolled through Facebook, liking the birthday wishes that had accumulated overnight. That's when I saw it. Derek had posted photos last night. He was at some rooftop bar in Chicago, arm around a woman I didn't recognize, raising a glass to the camera. The caption read, "Celebrating a big win with the team. Harper landed the Peterson account." He had time to celebrate work victories but couldn't send his mother a text on her birthday. I put my phone face down as Jim brought over my breakfast: blueberry pancakes, extra bacon, and a small candle stuck in the center of the stack. "Make a wish," he said with a wink. I closed my eyes, made a wish I knew wouldn't come true, and blew out the candle. After breakfast, I drove to the mall and bought myself a new sweater, emerald green. Beth always said it brought out my eyes, and a pair of earrings I'd been eyeing for months. If no one else was going to spoil me today, I might as well spoil myself. When I got home, there was a package on my doorstep from Beth. A beautiful hand-knitted shawl and a gift card to my favorite bookstore. I arranged them on the coffee table alongside the small pile of cards that had arrived in yesterday's mail from old friends and distant relatives. I was about to settle in with a new mystery novel when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Mrs. Wilson? This is Amanda from Lakeside Apartments in Chicago." My heart raced. Derek lived at Lakeside. "Yes?" I managed. "I'm calling because you're listed as the emergency contact for Derek Wilson. There's been a fire in his building. Everyone's safe," she added quickly, sensing my panic. "But the damage is significant. The whole north wing will be uninhabitable for at least 3 months during repairs." "Oh my God. Is Derek okay? Where is he now?" "He's fine, just a bit shaken up. Most residents are arranging to stay with family or friends, or the Red Cross is helping place others in temporary housing." I gripped the phone tighter. "Can I speak with him?" "He's not here right now. He asked me to contact you and—" She hesitated. "He wanted me to ask if he could stay with you until his apartment is repaired. He said he'd drive down tomorrow." Course. 3 years without a birthday call, but the moment he needed something, I was the first person he thought of. I closed my eyes, trying to process my feelings. Relief that he was okay. Hurt that he couldn't call himself. Anger at being taken for granted. And beneath it all, that stubborn, persistent love that never quite goes away, no matter how much your child disappoints you. "Mrs. Wilson, are you still there?" I opened my eyes and stared at the framed photo on my mantel. Derek at his college. Graduation, arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming at the camera. When had things changed? When had I become nothing more than a convenience to him, a safety net to be remembered only in emergencies? 3 birthdays, 3 years of being an afterthought, 3 years of making excuses for him to anyone who would listen. 3 years of waiting by the phone, hoping for a call that never came. Something shifted inside me, a resolve I didn't know I had. "Please tell Derek that I got your message," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "And tell him—" I paused, looking around at the home I'd maintained for him to always return to. "Tell him I'll be changing the locks tomorrow." I hung up before Amanda could respond. Then I picked up my novel, turned to chapter 1, and began to read. For the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see what happened next. The moment I hung up the phone, a strange calm washed over me. It was the kind of clarity that only comes after making a decision you've been avoiding for far too long. I called Beth back immediately. When she answered, I skipped the pleasantries. Derek's apartment building had a fire. He's fine, but he needs a place to stay. He was going to come here. Was? Beth picked up on my wording instantly. I told them to let him know I'm changing the locks. The line went quiet for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then I heard Beth exhale. Wow, Maggie. That's a big step. Too harsh? I asked, suddenly uncertain. No, Beth said firmly. It's about time. What made you finally draw the line? A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I traced the pattern on my new shawl with my fingertip. He couldn't even call himself Beth, had the apartment manager do it. And on my birthday, of all days. It just hit me that nothing's going to change if I keep enabling him. You're right, she said. But are you prepared for what comes next? This isn't going to be easy. She was right. Derek had never handled consequences. Well, as a child, the slightest punishment would trigger theatrical meltdowns. As a teenager, being grounded meant weeks of cold shoulders and slammed doors. As an adult, well, I was about to find out. I need to do this, I said, more to convince myself than Beth. He's 30 years old. It's time he learned that relationships take effort even with your mother. After we hung up, I sat on my couch staring at the silent phone. Part of me, the part that had nursed him through chickenpox and middle school heartbreaks, that had cheered at every baseball game and clapped, until my hands hurt at his graduation, wanted to call back the apartment manager. To say, of course, my son could come home, that my door was always open. But another part of me, the part that had spent the last 3 birthdays alone, making excuses for an absence that cut deeper each year, knew this moment had been a long time coming. I slept fitfully that night. By 7 the next morning, I was already on the phone with a locksmith. Anderson Locksmith, a cheerful voice answered. Hi, this is Margaret Wilson on Maple Street. I need to have my locks changed today. Is that possible? Let me check our schedule. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. We could fit you in this afternoon, around 2. Is this an emergency situation? Ma'am? Was it? No one was in immediate danger, but it felt urgent to me, like if I didn't follow through now, I never would. It's important, I said finally. 2 o'clock works fine. I spent the morning cleaning the house, not for Derek's arrival, but because it helped calm my nerves. Every room held memories of him. The kitchen where he'd attempted to make me breakfast in bed for Mother's Day when he was 8, leaving a disaster of pancake batter and orange juice spills. The living room where he'd opened Christmas presents, his face lighting up with each gift. The backyard where we'd planted a garden together the summer after Richard left, both of us needing the distraction. At noon, my phone rang. Derek's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Mom? His voice sounded different, tighter, more controlled than usual. Derek. I kept my tone neutral. So, I got a weird message from the apartment manager. Something. About you changing the locks? I figured there must be some misunderstanding. Of course he had. Derek had always been skilled at reframing situations to avoid responsibility. There's no misunderstanding, I said quietly. I meant what I said. Mom, come on. His voice took on that cajoling tone I knew so well. My apartment literally burned. Down? Where am I supposed to go? Your apartment building had a fire, Derek. There's a difference. And I'm sure you have options. Friends, co-workers, that woman in the photos from last night. Harper, was it? A pause. You saw that on Facebook? Mom, that was a work thing. I know. Work always comes first. I've accepted that. That's not fair, he protested. I've been incredibly busy building my career. You know how competitive this industry is? 2. Busy to send a text on my birthday? 3 years in a row? Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had an edge to it. Is that what this is about? You're punishing me over some missed birthdays? The cavalier way he dismissed it, some missed birthdays, made something harden in my chest. This isn't a punishment, Derek. It's a consequence. There's a difference. So you're really going to leave your only son homeless because I forgot to send a card? Do you hear how crazy that sounds? I closed my eyes, refusing to let him manipulate me with guilt. You're not homeless. You have a job, savings, friends. You have resources. And this isn't just about birthdays. It's about years of taking me for granted. Remember, I exist only when you need something. That's not true. I've been dealing with a lot. We all deal with a lot, Derek. That's life. But we still make time for the people who matter. So I don't matter to you anymore? Is that it? His voice cracked slightly, and I felt that familiar maternal pull, the instinct to comfort, to relent. I gripped the phone tighter. You matter more than you'll ever know. That's why I'm doing this. Because if I keep accepting the bare minimum from you, that's all you'll ever give. And we both deserve better than that. The line went quiet. When Derek spoke again, his voice was cold. Fine. Message received. Good to know where I stand. Derek, but he'd already hung up. I set the phone down, hands trembling. It had gone exactly as I'd expected, and yet nothing could have prepared me for the hollow feeling in my chest. The doorbell rang at precisely 2:00. The locksmith, Ryan Anderson, was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with kind eyes and capable hands. Just a regular lock change today? He asked as I showed him the front and back doors. Yes, I said, then hesitated. Actually, could you recommend something secure but not too complicated? I'm not great with technology. Ryan suggested a simple deadbolt with a keypad option. You can use a code or a key, he explained, and you can create temporary codes for visitors that expire after a set time. The flexibility appealed to me. I wasn't locking Derek out forever, just creating boundaries. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. While Ryan worked, my phone buzzed with text messages from Derek. I steeled myself and looked. This is extreme, even, for you. What happened to unconditional love? Dad would never do this. That last one stung. Richard had always been the fun parent after the divorce, the one who took Derek to baseball games and concerts while I worked extra shifts to keep our house. Richard had also been the one to miss child support payments when his new consulting business was going through a rough patch. But Derek only remembered the good parts. My phone rang again. Richard this time. Great. Derek had called in reinforcements. Richard, I answered, stepping onto the back porch for privacy. Maggie, what the hell is going on? Derek called me completely distraught, saying you're refusing to let him stay with you after his apartment burned down? I gave Richard the abbreviated version, including the part about 3 forgotten birthdays. So this is about birthday cards? Richard's dismissive tone was painfully familiar. Come on, Mags. He's a grown man with a demanding career. It's not about cards, Richard. It's about respect, about being taken for granted, about only hearing from our son when he needs something. He's building his life. That's what we raised him to do. And now when he needs his mother, you're turning your back on him? That's not the Maggie I knew. The Maggie you knew let people walk all over her, I said quietly. Including you. Richard sighed heavily. Look, Derek made a mistake. Kids make mistakes. He's 30, Richard. Not a kid. And it's not one mistake. It's a pattern. He needs to learn that relationships require effort from both sides. By making him homeless? He's not homeless, I said, echoing my words to Derek. He has options. He has resources. He's choosing to play the victim rather than accept responsibility. And what if he doesn't learn whatever lesson you're trying to teach? What if this permanently damages your relationship? Are you prepared for that? Was I? The question hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I guess we'll find out, I said finally. But continuing as we were was damaging our relationship too, just more slowly. After Richard hung up, promising to talk some sense into me later, I went back inside. Ryan was just finishing up with the back door. All set, Mrs. Wilson. Let me show you how it works. He demonstrated the keypad, helping me program in a code. I chose Yo928, Beth's birthday, something I wouldn't forget but Derek wouldn't guess. When Ryan left, I stood in my empty house, running my fingers over the new locks. They felt foreign, under my touch, a physical manifestation of the boundary I'd just established. My phone buzzed with a text from Cheryl. Beth called me. You okay? Want company? I almost declined, but the thought of spending the evening alone with my thoughts was suddenly unbearable. Please, I texted back. Cheryl arrived an hour later with wine and takeout from our favorite Thai place. She'd been my closest friend since... We met at a PTA meeting when Derek was in 3rd grade, our friendship outlasting both our marriages. So you actually did it, she said, nodding approvingly at the new locks as we settled at my kitchen table. I have to say, I'm impressed. Don't be impressed yet, I sighed, pouring us each a generous glass of wine. I haven't even made it 24 hours, and Richard already called to tell me what a terrible mother I am. Cheryl rolled her eyes. Richard needs to mind his own business. Has he forgotten how often he left you to handle everything alone when Derek was growing up? Apparently. I pushed pad thai around my plate without eating. Derek's furious, called in the big guns with his dad. Next will probably be guilt trips from relatives. Let them come, Cheryl said fiercely. It's about time someone stood up to that boy. You've bent over backwards for him for years, Maggie. Even after the divorce, when money was tight, you made sure he never felt it. All those extra shifts, just so he could go to soccer camp and have the right shoes. I hadn't thought about those. Days and years. How exhausted I'd been, working 60-hour weeks while maintaining the illusion of stability for Derek's sake. I thought I was doing the right thing, I said softly. Protecting him from the harsh realities. Maybe that was my mistake. Your mistake was letting him think your love and support were givens, not gifts. Cheryl reached for my hand. You're doing the right thing now. It's just late, that's all. After Cheryl left, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Derek, 2 from Richard, and a text from Beth. Holding up okay? I replied to Beth with a thumbs-up emoji, then muted my phone and went to bed. The next morning, I woke to the sound of someone pounding on my front door. Heart racing, I pulled on my robe and went downstairs. Through the window, I could see Derek, on my porch, looking disheveled and angry. Mom, he called, seeing my silhouette. Open the door. This isn't funny anymore. I hesitated, then stepped closer to the door without opening it. I told you I was changing the locks, Derek. Yeah, but I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. His voice was incredulous. Come on, let me in. We can talk about this. We are talking about this. Mom, seriously. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Richard it made my heart ache. I drove all night to get here. I'm exhausted. There's a Holiday Inn just off the highway, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Or you. Could call your father. I'm sure he'd be happy to put you up. Are you kidding me right now? Derek's expression darkened. You'd make your own son stay in a hotel? You're making choices, Derek. So am I. He stared at me through the glass, shaking his head. I don't even recognize you. Dad was right. You've completely lost it. Maybe I've just finally found myself, I said quietly. He let out a bitter laugh. Found yourself? What is this, some kind of midlife crisis? Next, you'll be buying a convertible and dating men half your age. The casual cruelty of his words stung, but I refused to show it. If that's what you think of me, then maybe it's best we have some distance right now. Fine, he snapped, stepping back. Have it your way. I watched through the window as he stormed back to his car, a sleek Audi he'd bought last year, posting photos online with the caption, "Hard work pays off." No mention that the down payment had come from his grandmother's inheritance, which I'd insisted he receive early when he complained about student loans. As his car screeched away, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Amanda from Lakeside Apartments again. Derek asked me to let you know he's applied for emergency relocation assistance through the Red Cross. Just thought you should know he's found accommodations." The message was clearly meant to make me feel guilty. Instead, I felt a strange sense of pride. He'd figured it out on his own, just as I knew he could. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went to work for an extra shift, grateful for the distraction of checking vitals and administering medications. My coworkers noticed something was different. Martinez from radiology commented that I seemed lighter somehow, and Nancy, the charge nurse who'd been my friend for decades, pulled me aside at lunch. "Everything okay, Maggie? You seem, I don't know, changed." I considered how to explain what had happened, but the words felt too new, too fragile to share widely. "Just setting some boundaries," I said finally. Nancy nodded knowingly. "About time. That boy of yours has been taking advantage of you for years." I looked at her in surprise. "How did you—" "Please," she snorted. "Who listened to you cry in the break room after he skipped your birthday dinner 3 years ago? Who covered your shift last Christmas when you were convinced he was finally coming home, only for him to cancel at the last minute?" She patted my hand. "We've all been waiting for you to wake up." By the time my shift ended, 5 more relatives had called. An aunt, 2 cousins, my nephew, and even Richard's mother, who had somehow always blamed me for the divorce despite Richard's infidelity. All with the same message. I was being unreasonable, cruel, unmaternal. I let their voicemails pile up, a chorus of disapproval that would have crushed me just days ago. Now I felt insulated from it, wrapped in the certainty that I was finally acting in service of a healthier relationship, not just the illusion of one. At home, I sat on my porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The air was cooler now, autumn asserting itself more confidently. Soon I'd need to rake the leaves, cover the rose bushes, prepare for winter. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Red Cross Housing is a motel by the interstate. Hope you're happy." I started to type a response, then deleted it. This was the pattern we needed to break, his passive-aggressive jabs, my apologetic placating. Instead, I set the phone aside and closed my eyes, listening to the gentle creaking of the swing chains and the distant sound of children playing down the street. For the first time in years, I felt at peace with my decisions. Whatever came next, whether Derek eventually recognized the wake-up call for what it was, or whether our relationship suffered irreparable damage, I had finally honored my own worth. As darkness fell, I went inside and locked my new doors, the solid click bringing a sense of security I hadn't realized I was missing. A week passed. The initial storm of calls and texts had subsided into an uneasy silence. Richard had finally stopped his daily lectures about family obligations, after I reminded him how often he'd put his own needs above Derek's when our son was growing up. Beth called every evening to check on me, her support unwavering even when I admitted to moments of doubt. The fall chill had settled into Mapleton. I spent my days off raking leaves and preparing my garden for winter, finding solace in the rhythm of seasonal tasks. There was something comforting about the predictability of nature, the way it followed its own timetable, regardless of human drama. "Ms. Wilson?" A small voice interrupted my thoughts as I knelt by my flower beds, cutting back the last of the summer perennials. I looked up to see Lily Reynolds, my 10-year-old neighbor, standing on the sidewalk clutching a pink envelope. "Hi, Lily," I smiled, brushing dirt from my gardening gloves. "What can I do for you?" Mom wanted me to give you this. She held out the envelope. It's an invitation to my birthday party next Saturday. It's a sleepover, but Mom said you don't have to stay over if you don't want to. She giggled at her own joke. I took the envelope, touched by the gesture. The Reynolds family had moved in next door 3 years ago, shortly after Tim got a job at the local high school as a physics teacher. His wife, Amber, had quickly become a friend, often bringing over her famous banana bread or stopping by for coffee. "Tell your mom I'm honored," I said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As Lily skipped away, I found myself thinking about Derek's childhood birthday parties, the superhero themes, the backyard scavenger hunts, the year he invited his entire 5th grade class for a pool party that nearly drove me to the brink of exhaustion. I'd poured my heart into creating magical celebrations for him, staying up late to frost cakes shaped like dinosaurs or spaceships, filling goodie bags with trinkets I could barely afford. Had he appreciated any of it? I wanted to believe he had, that somewhere beneath the entitled adult he'd become was still the boy who'd thrown his arms around me and declared each birthday the best one ever. Inside the house, my phone was ringing. Unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Wilson, this is Paul Hendricks from Lakeside Property Management. My pulse quickened. Yes? I'm calling regarding your son's apartment. The restoration company has assessed the damage, and unfortunately the timeline for repairs has been extended. We're looking at closer to 6 months rather than the 3 we initially estimated. I see, I said carefully. And you're calling me because... Well, the temporary housing assistance through the Red Cross only lasts for 2 weeks. Mr. Wilson listed you as his emergency contact, so we wanted to make sure he has alternative arrangements before that assistance expires this Friday. I closed, my eyes willing myself to stay strong. Mr. Hendricks, while I appreciate your concern, my son is 30 years old. His housing arrangements are his responsibility, not mine. Oh, Paul sounded taken aback. I apologize for the assumption. It's just that he mentioned he would be staying with family, so I thought, he has other family members, I said firmly. And friends? I'm sure he'll figure something out. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, tracing the wood grain with my fingertip. Was I being too harsh? 6 months was a long time to stay in temporary housing. But then I remembered all. The times I'd reached out to Derek only to be ignored or given half-hearted excuses. The birthdays, holidays, and ordinary weekends when a visit or even a phone call would have meant the world to me. My reflections were interrupted by a text from Cheryl. Spotted your son at Morgan's Cafe with Richard. Thought you should know. Morgan's was just 3 blocks from my house. A cozy breakfast spot where Derek and I used to have Sunday brunches after he graduated college but before he moved to Chicago. The fact that he was in town but hadn't attempted to contact me since that morning on my porch spoke volumes. I tried to focus on my evening routine, making dinner, catching up on my mystery novel, calling Beth, but my mind kept circling back to Derek and Richard, probably plotting their next approach. Richard had always been skilled at strategy, a trait Derek had inherited in spades. The doorbell rang at 7:30 p.m., just as I was settling in with a cup of tea. Through the peephole, I could see Richard standing on my porch, alone. I hesitated, then opened the door but remained in the doorway, blocking entrance. Richard, I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. Maggie. He looked older than when I'd last seen him at Derek's MBA graduation 2 years ago. More lines around his eyes, more gray in his once dark hair. May I come in? It's chilly out here. I was just about to head to bed, I lied. What do you need? He sighed, shoving his hands in the pockets of his expensive coat. The same brand he'd always favored, even when we could barely afford the mortgage. Can we not do this? The whole adversarial thing? I just want to talk. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside to let him in. Some habits die hard. Richard glanced around the living room, taking in the new armchair I'd bought last year, the different arrangement of photos on the mantel. Place looks good, he offered. Thanks. I remained standing. What did you want? To talk about? Derek, obviously. Richard sat on the couch without being invited. He's staying at my hotel. I know. Cheryl saw you at Morgan's. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Still have your spy network, I see. Small town, I shrugged. People notice things. Well, then you know he's in a tough spot. The hotel is fine for a few days, but I have to head back to Boston on Friday. My company won't keep covering the room once I'm gone. And he needs somewhere to stay, Maggie. For God's sake, he's your son. He's your son too, I pointed out. Why, can't he go to Boston with you? Richard shifted uncomfortably. Carla and I don't really have the space right now, with the twins and her mother staying with us. He trailed off, perhaps realizing how weak this sounded. Carla was Richard's third wife, 20 years his junior, with twin toddlers who'd made him a father again at 58. I'd met her once, at a college alumni event where we'd all awkwardly converged. She'd been polite but distant, clearly uncomfortable in my presence. So I don't have space either, I said, crossing my arms. My guest room is being renovated. Another lie, but it slid out easily. Come on, Mags. Richard used my old nickname, the one from our college days. We both know that's not true. What's really going on here? Is this some kind of payback for the divorce? Using Derek to hurt me after all these years? The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. Not everything is about you, Richard. This is between Derek and me. Then what is it? Because I've been racking my brain trying to understand how the woman who used to check if he was breathing when he napped is now turning him away when he needs help. I sighed deeply, sitting in my armchair across from him. Have you asked Derek that question? Has he told you about the last 3 years of our relationship? About how many times I've reached out only to be ignored or dismissed? About how he's forgotten my birthday for 3 years straight? Richard waved a dismissive hand. He's busy building his career. We were the same way at his age, remember? Working 60-hour weeks, trying to make our mark. No, we weren't, I said firmly. When I was his age, I was working full-time while raising him alone after you left, and I still called my mother every Sunday and remembered her birthday. Richard had the decency to look slightly abashed, but quickly recovered. Different generation, different expectations. This isn't about generational differences. It's about basic respect and appreciation. Something I failed to teach Derek by letting him take me for granted for too long. I leaned forward, meeting Richard's gaze directly. And something you're still enabling by swooping in to rescue him from the consequences of his actions. Richard's expression hardened. So this is some kind of tough love approach? Letting him struggle to teach him a lesson? I'm not letting him struggle. I'm requiring him to treat me with the same consideration he'd give a casual acquaintance before I open my home to him. I stood up, signaling that our conversation was ending. If Derek wants to stay here, all he has to do is acknowledge how he's treated me and commit to building a more respectful relationship moving forward. And if he doesn't, then he's choosing his pride over reconciliation. That's his right. Richard stood slowly, studying my face. You've changed, Maggie. I hope so, I said quietly. After Richard left, I expected to feel drained, but instead, I felt curiously energized. Standing my ground with him had been oddly liberating, perhaps because for so many years of our marriage, I'd prioritized keeping the peace over speaking my truth. The next morning, I was surprised to find a text from Derek. Can we talk? In person. No dad, no drama. Just us. Progress, perhaps. Morgan's at 10, I suggested. See you there, he replied. I arrived early, securing a quiet table in the corner, away from the usual crowd of retirees who gathered for the senior breakfast. Special. The cafe hadn't changed much over the years. Same check tablecloths, same local artwork on the walls, same heavenly smell of cinnamon rolls baking. Derek arrived precisely at 10, dressed in the casual but expensive style he'd adopted since landing his marketing job: designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, loafers that probably cost more than my weekly salary. But there was something different about his demeanor. Less swagger, more uncertainty. "Mom," he nodded, sliding into the seat. Across from me, Derek. I kept my tone neutral, neither warm nor cold. "How are you holding up?" He shrugged, fidgeting with the menu, though he knew it by heart. "Hotel's fine. Dad's been... Dad. Keeps telling me you'll come around if I just wait you out." "And what do you think?" I asked, curious about his perspective. Derek met my eyes, for the first time. "I think something's different this time. You seem, I don't know, resolved." The waitress came by for our orders: black coffee for me, some elaborate latte concoction for him. When she left, Derek cleared his throat. "Dad told me what you said, about respecting you, about needing me to acknowledge things." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I've been thinking about it," he said slowly, "about the birthdays and the holidays and everything. And I want to say I'm sorry. I should have been better about staying in touch." It was an apology, but a carefully worded one. Sorry for not staying in touch, not for consistently deprioritizing our relationship, for treating me as an afterthought, for taking without giving back. "Thank you for saying that," I said carefully. "But I'm wondering if you understand why those missed birthdays hurt so much." Derek shifted uncomfortably. "Because they're important to you?" "Because they symbolize something bigger," I explained gently. "They show where I fall on your priority list. Below work, below friends, below whatever else fills your days. And when the only time you reach out is when you need something from me." "That's not fair," he interrupted. "I text sometimes. I like your Facebook posts." "Derek," I said quietly, "when was the last time you called just to check how I was doing? Not because you needed advice or money or a place to stay, just because you cared about my well-being?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to produce an example. Our drinks arrived, creating a momentary distraction. Derek added 3 packets of sugar to his latte, a habit he'd had since college. "I do care," he said finally. "You're my mom. Of course I care." "I know you do, in your way," I acknowledged. "But caring isn't just a feeling, Derek. It's actions. It's an effort. It's remembering the important dates and showing up when it matters." "Like you're doing now?" There was an edge to his voice. "Showing up when it matters by shutting me out?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not shutting you out. I'm asking for more. There's a difference." "So what exactly do you want from me?" Derek asked, frustration evident in his tone. "A promise to call every Sunday? To send flowers on your birthday? What's the price of admission? Here, Mom?" The transactional way he framed it, as if maintaining our relationship was a burden rather than a privilege, told me he still didn't fully grasp what I was trying to convey. "I don't want gestures performed out of obligation, Derek. I want a genuine connection with my son. I want to matter to you not just when you need something, but all the time." He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture so like his father's, and sighed heavily. "Look, I'm trying here. I said I'm sorry. I admitted I should have been better about the birthdays. What more do you want?" "I want you to understand why it matters," I said simply. "Not just apologize because it's what you think I want to hear." Derek's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, then back at me. "I need to take this. Work thing." Of course it was. Some things never changed. "Go ahead," I said, gesturing toward the door. He stepped outside, phone pressed to his ear, immediately, animated in a way he hadn't been with me. Through the window, I could see him pacing the sidewalk, laughing at something his caller said. I finished my coffee slowly, watching him transform into the confident professional he was with everyone but me. In that moment, I realized we still had a long way to go. That one conversation wouldn't bridge the gap that had widened between us over years of neglect. When Derek returned, I had already paid the bill. "Sorry about that," he said, sliding back into his seat. "Client crisis. You know how it is." I nodded. "I should get going. I have errands to run." "Wait." Derek reached for my arm as I stood. "We didn't finish our conversation. What about my staying with you?" "Dad leaves Friday, and the Red Cross assistance ends the same day." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. The face I'd memorized from the moment the nurse placed him in my arms 30 years ago. The face I'd watched change from infant to toddler to teenager to man. "The guest room is yours," I said quietly. "But this is the beginning of our conversation, Derek, not the end. If you stay with me, things need to change between us." Relief washed over his features. "They will, I promise. Thank you, Mom. Seriously." As I walked to my car, I wondered if I'd made the right decision. Only time would tell. But at least now, the choice to rebuild our relationship wasn't mine alone to make. Derek would have to meet me halfway, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope that he would. Derek moved in on Friday afternoon, arriving with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box of belongings salvaged from his apartment. Richard dropped him off, offering a tight smile and a nod from the car before driving away, clearly relieved to be absolved of responsibility. "I put fresh sheets on the bed," I said as I led Derek to the guest room, the same room that had been his until he left for college. I'd redecorated it years ago, replacing the sports posters and desk with more neutral furnishings. Though a shelf still held his high school debate trophies and a few model airplanes he'd built with Richard. Derek set his bags down and surveyed the space. "Looks different." "It's been 12 years since you lived here," I pointed out. He nodded, running a finger along the dresser top. "Thanks for letting me stay. I know you didn't have to." "No, I didn't," I agreed. "But I'm hoping this gives us a chance to rebuild some things." "Me too." He sounded sincere, but I'd learned to be cautious with my expectations where Derek was concerned. I showed him the new locks, programming a temporary code for him that would need to be renewed every 2 weeks. A small reminder that his stay came with conditions. If he noticed the symbolism, he didn't comment on it. "I have a shift at the hospital tomorrow," I said as we headed to the kitchen. "But I'm free tonight if you want to get dinner." Derek checked his phone. "Actually, I have a virtual team meeting at 7. Rain check?" And so it began. The dance of avoidance I'd grown all too familiar with. "Sure," I said, hiding my disappointment. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge if you get hungry later." That night, I lay in bed listening to the muffled sound of Derek's voice from the guest room, confident, professional, occasionally punctuated by laughter. The work persona I rarely got to see. I wondered who those colleagues knew. What version of my son existed in their world that I no longer had access to? The first week of our cohabitation passed in a series of near misses. Our schedules rarely aligned. My early hospital shifts meant I was often asleep when he finished work, and he slept late on weekends when I was most available. When we did cross paths in the kitchen or living room, our conversations remained superficial. The weather, hospital gossip, his projects at work. I tried not to push, giving him space to settle in, but I couldn't help feeling that he was deliberately maintaining distance. The physical proximity hadn't translated to emotional closeness. "Give it time," Beth advised during our nightly call on day 8. "At least he's there. That's something." "Is it, though?" I countered, keeping my voice low, as I sat on my bedroom floor back against the closed door. "If nothing changes between us, what's the point? We're just roommates at this rate." "Have you tried initiating deeper conversations?" I sighed. "Every time I ask about anything beyond surface level, he gets a work call or suddenly remembers an email he needs to send." Classic avoidance, Beth observed. He knows there are issues to address but isn't ready to face them. After we hung up, I heard Derek's door open and his footsteps in the hallway. Taking a deep breath, I opened my door and stepped out. "Hey," he said, clearly startled to find me still awake. "Everything okay?" "Just checking if you need anything," I offered, searching for an opening. "We haven't had much chance to talk this week." "Yeah, sorry about that." He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar nervous tick. "Work's been crazy. The Peterson account is really taking off after that Chicago presentation." "That's great," I said automatically, though I knew nothing about the Peterson account beyond what I'd gleaned from his Facebook posts. "Maybe we could have breakfast together tomorrow. It's my day off." Derek hesitated. "I have an early call, but I could do lunch." It was something, at least. "Lunch works." The next morning, I woke early despite my day off, old habits from nursing, and decided to bake cinnamon rolls from scratch. It was something I used to do regularly when Derek was growing up, a Sunday tradition that had fallen by the wayside after he left for college. The familiar process of kneading dough and preparing the filling was therapeutic, taking me back to simpler times. Derek emerged from his room around 11, drawn by the aroma filling the house. He appeared in the kitchen doorway in sweatpants and a faded college t-shirt, looking younger and more vulnerable than the polished professional I'd grown accustomed to seeing. "You made cinnamon rolls," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. "I thought they might make a good lunch dessert." I smiled, sliding a plate toward him. "But I won't tell if you want one now." He accepted the plate and took a bite, closing his eyes briefly. "Just like I remember." "Some things don't change," I said, pouring him coffee. "Even when everything else does." Derek looked at me over the rim of his mug, something shifting in his expression. "I've missed this," he admitted quietly. More than I realized. It was the first genuine moment we'd shared since his arrival, a small crack in the carefully constructed wall between us. I decided to press gently. "Why didn't you ever come home, Derek? Really? Even for holidays?" He set his mug down, tracing the rim with his finger. "I don't know. At first it was work. Then it just became easier not to. The longer I stayed away, the harder it felt to come back." "Easier how?" He shrugged uncomfortably. "Easier to not face things, to pretend everything was fine from a distance." "What things didn't you want to face?" Derek hesitated, then sighed. How much I'd changed, maybe, or how much I hadn't. "I don't know, Mom. It's complicated." "Try me," I said gently. "I'm a pretty good listener." He broke off another piece of cinnamon roll, buying time. "After Dad left, you were always so perfect. Working all those shifts, never complaining, keeping everything together. And then when I got to Chicago and started my career, I felt like I was fumbling through everything, like I couldn't measure up to your example." The revelation stunned me. All these years, I'd assumed his distance stemmed from indifference or selfishness, not insecurity. Derek, I was far from perfect. I was terrified most of the time, just trying to keep us afloat. "You never showed it," he said. "You were always so strong." And then when my career started taking off, it felt like the one area where I might actually impress you. So I threw myself into it completely. "At the expense of everything else," I observed gently. He nodded slowly. "I guess I figured you'd always be there, that I could focus on proving myself professionally and then eventually circle back to the family stuff." "But life doesn't work that way," I said. "Relationships need tending. They don't just wait in suspended animation until you're ready to pay attention to them." "I'm realizing that now," Derek admitted. "The hard way." His phone buzzed on the counter, but for once, he didn't immediately grab it. Instead, he reached across the table and hesitantly covered my hand with his. "I really am sorry, Mom. About birthdays, about taking you for granted, about all of it." The simple sincerity in his voice made my throat tighten. This was the apology I'd been waiting for. Not the calculated one at the cafe, but something that acknowledged the deeper hurt. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means a lot." His phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. Derek glanced at it, then back at me, conflict evident in his expression. "Go ahead," I said, understanding the pull of old habits. "I know work is important too." He surprised me by silencing the phone instead. "It can wait. This is more important." We spent the afternoon talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Derek shared stories about his life in Chicago, the friendships he'd formed, the challenges of his job beyond the glossy Facebook posts. I told him about changes in Mapleton, about my consideration of early retirement, about my own regrets regarding our strained relationship. Neither of us mentioned how long he would stay, or what would happen when his apartment was repaired. It felt too fragile, this newfound connection, to burden with practicalities. That evening, as I prepared dinner with Derek, helping, or trying to, his culinary skills hadn't improved since college, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Derek offered, wiping his hands on a dish towel. From the kitchen, I heard Amber Reynolds' cheerful greeting, followed by her daughter Lily's excited voice. "We're inviting neighbors to our Halloween block party. Can you and your mom come?" Derek's response was warm, accepting on both our behalves before rejoining me in the kitchen with the orange invitation card. "Hope you don't mind," he said, showing me the details for the party scheduled 2 weeks away. I figured we could both use some neighborhood fun. The casual assumption that he'd still be here, that we'd attend together, warmed something inside me. Sounds perfect. The second week of our cohabitation felt different from the first. Derek made more effort to align his schedule with mine, joining me for morning coffee before my shifts and staying up to hear about my day when I returned. He set up his laptop at the kitchen table rather than isolating in his room, and even accompanied me on my Sunday grocery run, adding items to the cart that reflected his plan to contribute to household meals. Small changes, but significant ones. On my next day off, Derek surprised me by taking the entire day away from work, a rarity for him, and suggesting we drive to Lake Hollister, a state park about an hour from Mapleton where we'd often picnicked when he was young. "You don't have meetings?" I asked, surprised by the suggestion. "I rescheduled them," he said simply. "I thought we could use a day out of the house." The autumn day was perfect for a lake visit, cool but sunny, the surrounding forests ablaze with color. We hiked the shoreline trail, reminiscing about family, trips, and Derek's first fishing expedition with Richard, which had ended with his father accidentally hooking his own thumb. "Dad was so determined not to cry in front of me," Derek laughed. His face was turning purple from the effort. "That was your father all over," I smiled. "Always needing to appear invincible." Derek's expression grew thoughtful. "I think I inherited some of that. The need to seem like I have everything under control, even when I don't. We all do it to some extent," I acknowledged. "But there's strength and vulnerability too, in admitting when you're struggling or when you've made a mistake." "Like I did with you," he said quietly. "Like we both did," I corrected him. "I wasn't perfect either, Derek. I should have addressed our drifting relationship years ago instead of just feeling hurt and waiting for you to change." We found a sunny spot overlooking the water and spread out the simple picnic I'd packed. Sandwiches, fruit, and thermoses of hot chocolate, a tradition from his childhood park visits. "Mom?" Derek said as we watched a pair of ducks glide across the lake's surface. "I've been thinking about what happens when my apartment's fixed." My heart constricted. I'd been carefully avoiding this topic, afraid of the answer. "I've been looking at positions in the Mapleton area," he continued, surprising me. "My company has a satellite office in Westridge. It's only a 30-minute commute. I could transfer." "You'd move back home?" I couldn't keep the astonishment from my voice. "What about Chicago? Your friends, your life there? Derek shrugged, his gaze still on the water. I've been realizing lately that success isn't just about career advancement, and I've missed more than just cinnamon rolls. He turned to me. This whole situation, it's been a wake-up call about what really matters. I wanted to believe him, but caution tempered my hope. Are you sure? This is a big decision to make in the heat of emotion. I've actually been thinking about it since before the fire, he admitted. I just didn't know how to bring it up after everything, whether you'd even want me around more permanently. Of course I would, I said gently. But I'd want it to be for the right reasons, not out of guilt or obligation. It's not, he assured me. It's about priorities, about realizing I built this whole impressive career at the expense of the relationships that actually make life meaningful. He gave a self-deprecating laugh. Pretty cliché, right? Big city hotshot has an epiphany about what really matters. Sometimes, clichés become clichés because they're true, I smiled. As we packed up our picnic and headed back to the car, Derek's phone rang. He checked the caller ID, then looked at me apologetically. It's Harper, about the Peterson account. Do you mind if I take this? It'll just be a minute. Go ahead, I nodded, continuing toward the parking lot to give him privacy. Through the trees, I could hear snippets of his conversation. Professional, focused, but brief. True to his word, he rejoined me within minutes. Everything okay at work? I asked. Just a quick question about presentation slides, he said. All good now. In that simple exchange, his transparency about the call, his effort to keep it brief, his return to our outing, I saw evidence of the change he was trying to make. Not perfection, but progress. A rebalancing of priorities that had been skewed for too long. As we drove home through the golden late afternoon light, Derek reached over and briefly squeezed my hand. Thanks for today, Mom, for everything. I squeezed back, allowing myself to believe that perhaps this crisis, my forgotten birthday, his apartment fire, our painful confrontations, had been the catalyst for healing we both needed. The road ahead wouldn't be perfect. Old habits don't disappear overnight, and trust takes time to rebuild. But for the first time in years, we were traveling in the same direction, side by side instead of worlds apart. And for now, that was enough. A month passed, then two. Autumn deepened into winter, the first snowfall dusting Mapleton in early December. Derek was still living with me while his apartment underwent repairs, but what had begun as a temporary arrangement had evolved into something that felt increasingly permanent and surprisingly comfortable. The Reynolds Halloween block party had been a turning point. Seeing Derek chat easily with my neighbors, helping Lily bob for apples, and carving an elaborate jack-o'-lantern for Mrs. Gonzalez, had shown me a side of him I'd forgotten existed. The sociable, thoughtful young man who'd been buried beneath years of career-driven ambition. Your son is delightful, Amber had whispered to me as we watched Derek judge a children's costume contest. You must be so proud. I was, but more importantly, I was hopeful. The changes I'd seen in him weren't just for show. Derek had followed. Through on exploring positions at the Westridge office, interviewing for a senior marketing role that would allow him to maintain his career trajectory while basing himself closer to home. When the offer came through in mid-November, he'd been genuinely excited, not resigned. It's actually a better opportunity than I expected, he'd explained over dinner. They're expanding their digital division, and with my Chicago experience, I'd be heading up the new team. His enthusiasm had eased my lingering concerns that he might resent the move or blame me for forcing a career sacrifice. This wasn't a step backward for him. It was a recalibration, a chance to build success on more balanced terms. As Christmas approached, Derek threw himself into holiday preparations with unexpected zeal. He spent a weekend stringing lights along the eaves of the house. Dad never did this right, he'd commented, securing the strands with proper clips instead of the haphazard staples Richard had always used. He accompanied me to the tree farm, insisting on a fuller spruce than I would have chosen for myself, and dug through the attic to find ornaments I hadn't displayed in years. "Remember this one?" he asked one evening as we decorated, holding up a clay star painted in uneven blue stripes. "Fourth grade art class, Mrs. Pemberton said my artistic vision was unique." That was her diplomatic way of saying you had no talent whatsoever, I laughed, taking the ornament and hanging it in a prominent position. But I always loved it. These moments, rediscovering shared history, creating new memories, were healing bridges across the years we'd spent apart. Not everything was perfect, of course. Derek still took too many work calls during dinner, still occasionally retreated into his professional shell when stressed. I still sometimes held my breath when he was late coming home, half expecting him to revert to his old patterns of absence and distance. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. But we were both trying, and that made all the difference. On a snowy Tuesday in mid-December, I arrived home from a particularly grueling hospital shift to find Derek in the kitchen, surrounded by cooking implements, and wearing an apron I didn't even know we owned. "What's all this?" I asked, hanging my coat and toeing off my snow-crusted boots. "Dinner," he announced proudly. Well, attempting dinner. The recipe looked simpler online. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Flour dusted every surface, vegetable peelings overflowed from the sink, and something that smelled suspiciously burnt lingered in the air. But Derek's face was so earnest, so determined, that I couldn't help but smile. "What are we having? Chicken marsala, or something approximating it." He stirred a sauce that was decidedly lumpier than any marsala I'd encountered. "I wanted to do something nice for you. You've been pulling double shifts all week." "That's very thoughtful," I said, genuinely touched. "Can I help?" Derek shook his head. "Nope. You sit. Pour yourself some wine. I've got this." He hesitated, then added, "Also, there's a surprise after dinner." Intrigued, I did as instructed, settling at the kitchen table with a glass of Merlot, watching my son navigate the culinary chaos he'd created. Whatever he was making might not be edible, but his effort spoke volumes. The chicken marsala turned out to be surprisingly decent, slightly overdone and missing some key flavors, but made with care. We ate at the dining room table, which Derek had set with the good dishes usually reserved for holidays. "Okay, what's the occasion?" I asked as he cleared our plates. "Did you get another promotion already? Or is this a preemptive apology for something I don't know about yet?" Derek laughed. "Neither. Just wait here, okay? I'll be right back." He disappeared into the guest room, his room now, really, and returned with a small wrapped package and an envelope. "Early Christmas gift?" I guessed. "Not exactly." He placed them before me, suddenly looking nervous. "Just open them." The envelope first. Inside was a printed itinerary for a weekend trip to New York City in April. Broadway shows, dinner reservations, hotel accommodations. "Derek, this is too much," I started, but he shook his head. "It's not enough, actually. Look at the dates." I examined the itinerary more carefully and felt my breath catch. The trip was scheduled for the weekend of my birthday. "I thought we could start a new tradition," Derek explained, his voice softening. "I know I missed too many birthdays. I can't get those back, but I can make sure all your future ones are special." Tears pricked at my eyes. That's wonderful. Thank you." "There's more," he urged, nodding toward the package. I unwrapped it carefully to find a leather-bound book. Opening it, I discovered it was a photo album, but not an old one. This contained recent photos. Derek and me at the Halloween block party, at Lake Hollister, decorating the Christmas tree. Interspersed were handwritten notes from him, capturing memories and reflections. "I know it's kind of old school," he said, watching my reaction. "But I thought we could add to it over time, document this new chapter." The thoughtfulness of the gift, not just purchased but created, requiring time and reflection, moved me deeply. This wasn't the impersonal gift card he might have sent in previous years, if he'd remembered at all. This was personal, meaningful. "It's perfect," I said, reaching for his hand across the table. "Thank you for this." "For everything." Derek squeezed my hand, then cleared his throat. "Actually, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. I've been looking at apartments in Westridge and—" My heart sank a little. Of course he would need his own place eventually. It was unrealistic to think he'd want to live with his mother indefinitely, no matter how much our relationship had improved. "And I was wondering how you'd feel about me buying a place here in Mapleton instead. Maybe that duplex that just went on the market on Cedar Street?" I blinked in surprise. "The one just 3 blocks over? Mrs. Abernathy's old place?" He nodded. "It would be close enough that we could still see each other regularly, but give us both our space. What do you think?" The suggestion was so perfectly balanced, acknowledging our need for independence while affirming his commitment to maintaining our relationship, that I found myself smiling through tears. I think Mrs. Abernathy would approve. She always said, "Young families should live on Cedar Street." "Well, I'm hardly a young family yet," Derek laughed. "But who knows? Maybe someday." The casual mention of his potential future, one that included staying in Mapleton, perhaps eventually having a family of his own nearby, was the final gift, unspoken but precious. 2 days before Christmas, Derek received a call from Lakeside Property Management. Paul Hendrick's news was unexpected. The damage to Derek's building was more extensive than initially thought, with structural issues that would extend repairs well into the summer. "What will you do?" I asked when he shared the update. Derek shrugged, surprisingly unperturbed. "Accelerate my house hunting, I guess. The timing actually works out. I start at the West Ridge office January 15th, and the Cedar Street duplex is available February 1st. "You're taking this well," I observed. The old Derek would have been furious about the delay. The old Derek didn't have a comfortable backup plan, he pointed out. Then, more seriously, and the old Derek didn't understand what really mattered. On Christmas Eve, we continued what had always been our family tradition, attending the candlelight service at First Presbyterian, then returning home for hot chocolate and one early gift. This year, the church pews were filled with familiar faces who seemed surprised but pleased to see Derek beside me. Pastor Williams, who'd known Derek since his confirmation classes, made a point of welcoming him personally. "Good to have you, back in the fold," he said, shaking Derek's hand warmly. "Your mother's been keeping your place warm." I'd worried the comment might make Derek uncomfortable, suggesting obligation or guilt, but he simply smiled and replied, "I'm lucky she did." Back home. As we sipped hot chocolate by the fire, Derek handed me a small box for my traditional Christmas Eve gift. Inside was a key on a silver keychain shaped like a house. "I know you already have a spare key," he explained, "but this one's different. It's symbolic. I want you to know that no matter where I live, whether it's Chicago or Westridge, or hopefully, this duplex on Cedar, you'll always have a key. You'll always be welcome. No locks will ever keep you out." The gesture, an elegant inversion of my changed locks that had sparked our reconciliation, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, clutching the key. "That means everything." My gift to him was similarly symbolic. A framed photograph of the two of us from the lake outing, arms around each other, laughing at some forgotten joke. The frame bore a simple engraving: "New Beginnings." Christmas Day brought more gifts, more laughter, and a surprise video call from Beth and her family in Arizona, who were delighted to see Derek at my side. "Well, well, the prodigal returns," Beth teased good-naturedly. "About time, nephew." "Better late than never, right, Aunt Beth?" Derek replied, accepting the gentle ribbing with grace. After the call, as we prepared our Christmas dinner, Derek on vegetable duty with strict instructions to just chop, don't attempt to cook. He grew contemplative. "What are you thinking?" "About so seriously over there?" I asked, checking the roast in the oven. "Just how close I came to losing all this," he said quietly. "If you hadn't stood your ground that day, if you just let me stay without addressing our issues, nothing would have changed." "We'll never know for sure," I pointed out. "No, I know myself," he insisted. "I would have taken the easy way out, like I always did. Stayed until my apartment was fixed, then gone right back to Chicago and my comfortable patterns." He set down his knife and looked at me directly. "Your courage forced me to face reality, to make different choices." It didn't feel like courage. At the time, I admitted. It felt terrifying. I was afraid I might lose you completely. "Instead, you got me back," he smiled. "The real me, not just the occasional visitor version. Worth the risk, then." As we carried our Christmas feast to the dining table, the good china making its second appearance that month, I reflected on the journey we'd traveled. From 3 forgotten birthdays and changed locks to a hard-won reconnection that felt stronger, more authentic than what we'd had before. Not because the hurt had magically disappeared, but because we'd both been willing to acknowledge it, to learn from it, to build something better from its ashes. The doorbell rang just as we were sitting down. "Are we expecting someone?" Derek asked, surprised. I shook my head, equally confused, and went to answer it. On the doorstep stood Richard, looking uncertain and holding a poinsettia plant. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "I'm in town visiting. Old friends and thinking, well, it's Christmas." For a moment, I was transported back decades, to holidays when we were a traditional family, when Richard's presence at Christmas dinner was expected rather than surprising. So much had changed since then. I glanced back at Derek, who had come to the hallway to see who had arrived. Our eyes met in silent communication, and he gave a small nod. "We were just sitting down to dinner," I told Richard. "There's plenty if you'd like to join us." Richard's face registered surprise, then gratitude. "I'd like that very much. Thank you, Maggie." As I ushered Richard inside, Derek added another place setting to our table. We weren't magically becoming a reunited family, too much water under that bridge, but we were modeling something important: the grace to welcome, the strength to forgive, the wisdom to acknowledge that relationships evolve over time. Seated around the Christmas table, Derek, Richard, and me, we represented not what once was, but what could be when courage overcomes fear, when communication replaces silence, when boundaries are respected rather than ignored. Spring would bring my birthday trip to New York with Derek. Summer would see him fully settled in the Cedar Street duplex. He'd made an offer the day after Christmas, which had been immediately accepted. Life would continue to unfold in ways none of us could predict, but one thing was certain. The locks had been changed, literally and figuratively. Old patterns had been broken, new expectations established, and in that change had come not loss, as I had feared, but a restoration more valuable than anything I could have imagined. Sometimes, I reflected as I passed the cranberry sauce to my ex-husband and smiled at my son. The truest love isn't found in endless accommodation, but in the courage to demand better, for yourself and for those you care about most. It had taken 3 forgotten birthdays and a changed lock to teach us that lesson, but now that we knew it, we would never forget. 3 months after Christmas, as winter reluctantly gave way to spring in Mapleton, life had settled into a new rhythm that still occasionally surprised me with its harmony. Derek's transition to the Westridge office had gone smoothly, his natural talent and Chicago experience making him an immediate asset to the smaller satellite location. The Cedar Street duplex had become his in late January, and he'd spent weekends painting and furnishing it, often enlisting my help or opinion, but clearly making the space his own. Our relationship had found a comfortable balance. Sunday dinners at my place had become a standing tradition, and he frequently stopped by after work just to chat. We weren't in each other's pockets, but the casual, consistent connection that had been missing for so many years had been restored. Perhaps stronger than before, because we both now recognized its value. April arrived, bringing with it my birthday and our planned trip to New York. In the days leading up to our departure, I found myself uncharacteristically nervous. "It's just a weekend away," Cheryl said as we shared coffee at Morgan's Cafe. "Why the jitters?" I stirred my latte, trying to articulate feelings I didn't fully understand myself. "I guess I'm afraid of expecting too much. What if the old patterns resurface? What if work calls and he's distracted the whole time? Has he given you any reason to worry since he moved back?" I had to admit he hadn't. There had been work emergencies, of course, times when he needed to step away for a call or spend an evening finalizing a presentation. But he'd always been transparent about it, always made an effort to reconnect afterward. "No," I conceded. "He's been consistent. I just can't shake this fear that it's temporary, that eventually he'll revert to taking me for granted." Cheryl reached across the table to cover my hand with hers. "Trust takes time to rebuild, Maggie. But at some point, you have to decide whether to live in the shadow of past hurts or in the light of what's possible now." Her words stayed with me as I packed for our trip, carefully selecting outfits for the Broadway shows and nice restaurants Derek had included in our itinerary. The weather forecast promised perfect spring days in the city, cool but sunny, ideal, for the walking tours he'd arranged. Derek arrived at my house early on the morning of our departure, looking boyishly excited. "Ready for adventure, birthday girl?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I smiled, wheeling my small suitcase to his car. "Though you know my actual birthday isn't until Saturday." Which is why I scheduled the best show and restaurant for that night. He nodded, loading my bag into the trunk beside his own. But the celebration starts now. The drive to the airport was filled with easy conversation. Derek sharing amusing stories about his new colleagues, me updating him on hospital gossip. No mention of past tensions, no rehashing of old wounds, just the comfortable banter of two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. As our plane took off, I found myself studying Derek's profile as he gazed out the window. The angular jaw from his father, the slightly crooked nose from a baseball accident in high school, the hint of gray just beginning at his temples that made him look distinguished rather than older. My son, but also this man I was still getting to know in many ways. "What?" he asked, catching me watching him. "Nothing. Just thinking about how strange life is sometimes. How things circle back in ways you never expect." He smiled. "Good strange. Though?" "Very good strange," I agreed. New York welcomed us with its characteristic energy. The bustling streets, the eclectic mix of people, the sense of possibility vibrating in the air. Our hotel in Midtown offered spectacular views of the city skyline, the room elegant without being ostentatious. "This is too much," I protested again as I took in the fresh flowers, the bottle of champagne, the box of chocolates from a famous local chocolatier waiting in our room. "It's not nearly enough," Derek countered. "Consider all the celebrations I missed." Our first day was a whirlwind of activity, a morning at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, lunch at a charming cafe in Central Park, an afternoon walking the High Line, and an evening at a Broadway show that had us both laughing until our sides hurt. Throughout it all, Derek remained fully present, his phone mostly tucked away, his attention undivided. Only once did work intrude, a call from his Westridge team about a client presentation. He excused himself to take it in the hotel lobby while I rested before dinner, returning 20 minutes later apologetic but calm. "Everything okay?" I asked, watching for signs of the old stress, the old prioritizing of work above all else. "All handled," he assured me. "Just needed to give them access to some files. They don't actually need me until we're back. No drama, no hours of emergency calls, just a brief interruption efficiently addressed." Another sign of the changes he'd made, the boundaries he'd established in his professional life. My actual birthday dawned clear and perfect. Derek had planned a leisurely breakfast at a famous bakery, followed by a boat tour around Manhattan, giving us unique views of the city from the water. Though I'd visited New York several times before, twice with Richard during our marriage, once for a nursing conference, I'd never seen it quite this way, through the eyes of someone determined to make the experience special for me. "Holding up okay?" Derek asked as we strolled through Greenwich Village, peering into shop windows and people watching. "Not too much walking?" "I'm a nurse who spends 12-hour shifts on my feet," I reminded him with a laugh. "I can handle a day of city exploration. Just checking. Dad always said you weren't big on walking tours." I raised an eyebrow. "Your father was the one with the tender feet. He just blamed it on me to save face." Derek looked surprised, then laughed. "Really? He always made it sound like you were the one who needed taxis everywhere." "One of many, Richard." "Wilson revisionist history moments," I said, but without bitterness. Time had softened even those old irritations. As evening approached, Derek guided me to a restaurant in a beautifully renovated townhouse, where the maitre d' greeted him by name. "Mr. Wilson, we have your table ready. Right this way." We were seated in a quiet corner with a view of a small garden courtyard, fairy lights twinkling in the trees. The setting was intimate without being overly romantic, perfect for a mother-son celebration. "When did you have time to research all these places?" I asked, genuinely curious about the thought that had gone into each carefully selected venue. "I may have spent a few lunch breaks exploring options," Derek admitted, "and I might have consulted Beth for her input on what you'd enjoy most." The fact that he'd coordinated with my sister, taking the initiative to ensure this celebration, would reflect my tastes rather than just what was convenient or obvious, touched me deeply. As our appetizers arrived, Derek raised his wine glass. "To new traditions and second chances," he said. "Happy birthday, Mom." "To new traditions," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. Midway through our main course, Derek's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at it, then back at me, hesitation clear in his expression. "Go ahead," I nodded, bracing myself for the interruption I'd half expected all weekend. Derek surprised me by silencing the phone without checking the message. "It's my night off," he said simply. "Whatever it is can wait until tomorrow." The moment was small but significant, a clear demonstration of his changed priorities. After dinner, as we walked back toward our hotel, Derek guided me through a small detour to a quiet side street. "I have one more surprise," he said, pointing to a nondescript doorway with a small brass plaque beside it. "It's not on any tourist maps." Inside was a tiny jazz club, intimate and old-world, with perhaps 15 small tables arranged around a small stage where a trio of musicians was setting up. The walls were lined with vintage photographs of jazz legends, many signed with personal inscriptions to the club's owner. "How did you find this place?" I whispered as we were led to a reserved table near the front. "Remember Mr. Harmon? Your patient from last year who was a session musician back in the 60s? I got in touch with him when I was planning this trip. He said if we only had time for one music venue in New York, this should be it." I was speechless, not just at the thoughtfulness of the venue selection, but at the revelation that Derek had reached out to someone from my life at the hospital, someone I'd mentioned only in passing during our conversations after he moved back. He had been listening, really listening, not just to my words but to the small details that made up my world. The music was exceptional, classic jazz standards performed with both technical precision and soulful interpretation. Derek wasn't a huge jazz fan by nature, preferring more contemporary sounds, but he seemed genuinely engaged, watching the bassist's intricate fingerwork with appreciation. During a break between sets, he leaned toward me. "I have something for you. Not a big gift, that was the trip, but something I wanted you to have today." From his pocket, He withdrew a small velvet box and placed it on the table between us. Not jewelry, it was the wrong shape for that, but something equally precious judging by his expression. Inside was a watch, not new, but vintage, its face elegantly simple, its leather band well worn but cared for. It was Grandma's, Derek explained softly. Dad gave it to me after she died, but I think you should have it. I found it when I was packing up my Chicago apartment. I lifted the watch carefully, turning it over to see the initials engraved on the back, EFW, Eleanor Frances Wilson, Richard's mother. She and I had had a complicated relationship, especially after the divorce, but there had been good times too, particularly when Derek was young. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely moved. But are you sure? She was your grandmother? Derek nodded. She'd want you to have it. Despite everything with you and Dad, she always said you were the best mother a child could ask for. Some of her best memories were watching you with me when I was little. This was news to me. Eleanor had never expressed such sentiments directly. But perhaps that was another legacy of those years. Things left unsaid that should have been voiced, appreciation unexpressed until it was too late. Thank you, I whispered, fastening the watch around my wrist. I'll treasure it. The second set began, the smoky vocals of the female singer filling the room with a hauntingly beautiful rendition of The Nearness of You. As I listened, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this moment. From the pain of forgotten birthdays to the joy of this thoughtfully planned celebration. We had come full circle in a way. But circles can be spirals, too, returning to similar points while still moving forward, upward, into new territory. Later, back in our hotel room with the city lights glimmering outside our window, I found myself unusually emotional as I prepared for bed. Everything okay? Derek asked, concern evident in his voice. More than okay, I assured him. Just processing. This has been the most wonderful birthday I can remember. Better than when I was 8 and tried to make you breakfast in bed, but set off the smoke alarm? I laughed at the memory. Even better than that, though that one's still a close second. Derek's expression grew serious. I need you to know something, Mom. This weekend, these celebrations, they're not just for your birthday. They're my way of showing you that I understand now what I didn't before. That relationships matter more than career milestones or office prestige. That you matter. I know, I said softly. Your actions have been speaking very clearly. I just don't want you to think this is a one-time effort, he continued, or that things will slide back to how they were before. This is the new normal, me being present, being engaged, being the son you deserve. The earnestness in his voice brought tears to my eyes. And you're the son I'm incredibly proud of, I told him. Not because you planned a perfect birthday, but because you had the courage to grow, to change, to rebuild what was broken between us. We fly home tomorrow, back to our routines in Mapleton and Westridge, back to work shifts and client meetings, to Sunday dinners and occasional weeknight check-ins, back to the everyday reality we've constructed with such care these past months. But we return different than we left, with new memories shared, with trust further solidified, with the knowledge that what we've rebuilt isn't fragile but resilient, strong enough to weather future storms, should they come. As I drift toward sleep, the vintage watch still on my wrist like a talisman connecting past and present, I find myself thinking of that October day when I changed the locks, how terrified I'd been, how certain I was risking everything. How impossible it seemed then that such a drastic act could lead not to permanent estrangement, but to profound reconciliation. Sometimes love requires courage more than comfort, boundaries more than blind acceptance. Sometimes the truest gift we can give those we care about is the chance to be better, even when that chance comes wrapped in consequences rather than consolation. The lesson wasn't easy for either of us, but standing on the other side of that difficult crossing, I wouldn't change a thing. Not the pain, not the confrontation, not even those 3 forgotten birthdays that finally pushed me to act. For they led us here, to a place where remembering matters, where showing up counts, where the locks may have been changed, but the door remains forever open to the possibility of what love can become when it's honored by both the giving and the receiving. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.